Hello, everyone. Welcome to another interesting topic in office procedures. The topic today is going to be telecommunication, which involves telephone and how offices communicate via telephone in an office environment. So let's get prepared to learn a lot about how the office system works and what type of things actually fall into this category. As usual, welcome to the virtual space. Let's work together to learn, share ideas, participate, and learn something new. The wise always seek knowledge. Telephone communication. Communication is a big part of business, as we would have seen already. It involves communicating or talking back and forth with someone. And so telecommunication is considered one of your, not visual, sorry, it's considered one of your auditory or oral forms of communication. It's also electronic because you're using a telephone to actually convey a message. And so a telephone is an electronic device. And so telephone is a good method of communication because it allows for personal contact and it can be used to contact persons inside and outside of the business. So it's not like a letter, something that's written. You can actually get somebody's opinions or get those non-verbal cues, things that they're not saying directly. You can tell from telephone. So that includes like their tone, their enunciation, the way they're saying words can give you an idea of a little bit more about the person and how they're feeling and what they're trying to say. Telecommunications, of course, is the electronic transfer of data over a distance. So I can call somebody here today in another country. I can call somebody in another office on another island because of the systems that are in place for telephone that makes it electronic. Normally, with telephones back in the day, we had what was called an analog signal, which was a signal that allowed information to be transferred or voices to be transferred from one telephone handset to another. Nowadays, we have digital signals which use satellites and the internet as well to actually make sure that the other person on the other side of the telephone can hear what is being said. Telephony is a word, and it is considered to be the integration of computer and telephone technologies. And so this includes features like having more than just your regular telephone call, because there's some type of computer aspect related to it. Two-way calling, video calls, audio calls, computer calls. Just being able to call via Zoom is a form of telephony because it involves using a computer and telephone technologies, which is actually making a call on the computer. Other features include being able to send and edit files through software. That's a computer feature that's being allowed on a telephone call. There's also call ID, there's conference calling, access to the internet, management of voicemail, fax, and email messages, and VoIP, voice over internet protocol. Telephony is only made possible through the use of computer and internet and telephone technologies all coming together, taking us out of the prehistoric days when our telephone was just used for calls. Now our telephones can be used for so much more because these phones have a lot of computer features attached to them. So we can thank telephony for that. When I say VoIP, voice over internet protocol, what that is that's technology that allows users to make telephone calls using the internet. If you think of companies like Cable Bahamas and their telephone system works along with the internet. So when the internet is out, it's difficult to make calls out because you need the internet to make that call versus a BTC. You don't need the internet to make a phone call. Okay, you just need a phone and you just need a line, a free line. And so VoIP is just a system that allows us to use the internet along with telephone to make those calls. Back in the day, that was pretty rare, but now it's pretty straightforward. You had things like your Vibe phone and these other phones that allowed you to plug into your internet your modem and be able to call US numbers and things like that. Now it's not as common because you can do it right from your cell phone at a much cheaper cost. Advantages of things like this is going to be that it saves money because, like you said, it's much cheaper now to call over the internet versus just picking up the phone, a regular landline, and dialing an international number. It's going to cost you so much more. You use the internet to place calls, which makes it a little bit more reliable once you have reliable internet. And it reduces local telephone services needed. So back in the day, we used to have operators. I honestly don't even know if we still have operators, but we used to have operators that helped us to make calls. And now that's not as common, and therefore there's an advantage. You don't need to use operators and local telephone services as you did back in the day. And of course, there are other services that come along with voice over internet protocol that are free of charge. That is a major benefit to any company. Disadvantages being that if power is lost, then the internet is no longer available. And that's a huge disadvantage because you don't want to be cut off just because the power is off. Internet connection issues can affect service. So if internet connection is bad, then the call would be bad, which is not good or not desirable in a business environment. You want to be professional. You want to be able to help your customers, and you don't want to do that with fear of the internet not being able to hear what your customer is saying on the phone, or not being sure if your phone is going to be disconnected because of bad internet connection. Another disadvantage is, of course, when you have these VoIPs, it gets a little bit trickier when it comes to dialing emergency numbers like 911, 911, because those are registered on local telephone services, not internet-based, because internet-based can be from anywhere in the world. Another thing I want to talk about as it relates to telephone is going to be conference calls. And so what a conference call is when multiple people come together on a telephone to have a meeting. And so normally with these type of calls, there's specific equipment that's used to allow multiple callers to be on one phone call at once. As well as there are other tools you can use. For example, Zoom is a tool that you can use for conference call because Zoom gives you a unique number that you can actually pass on and persons dial into the phone. Everything doesn't have to be video facing, but it's also telephone facing and voice, use of the voice there as well. When it comes to conference calls, when you have certain equipment, you can use direct dialing. So direct call the number specifically without the help of anybody else. And so that means you won't need any outside help to make a call. And so with that, you just normally pick up the phone, dial the area code, and then you're able to dial the international number and connect to the conference call. What happens is as soon as the phone picks up, charges normally begin. When we have an operator dialed conference call, that just means that instead of dialing it myself, the number myself, I ask the operator to assist with the conference call by calling everybody at a specific time and connecting us all together. And so usually you have to use an operator with an operator dial call to set it up. And it's usually a different charge as well as more costly than actually using it yourself. What happens is you provide the operator with information like the day, the time zone, the estimated length of the call, and who should be on the call, and they make those calls for you. With dial-in service, what happens is participants are given the number, a special number, to call at a specific time, and then everybody is connected once they dial into that number. But those are 3 different ways to have conference calls. 1, by just dialing everybody yourself and connecting the call. 2, by using an operator to connect the call, to connect everybody to one call, or just sending out information as it relates to the phone number to dial at the time of the meeting and then having that actual meeting. Preparing for a call. So within business, we all know that we're going to have to answer the phone or answer a telephone call be a part of a meeting, all these other things. And so when it comes to telephone and telephone calls, what you want to do is you make sure you're preparing for the call. And so that means you let all participants of the call know when the call is supposed to happen, the date and the time of the call, and the purpose of the call. Just when you're having a conference call, you want to verify all telephone numbers before you begin a conference call. And you want to send out any information needed or items to be discussed in advance to participants. So let's say the call is a meeting to discuss a report. Well, you want to make sure everybody has a report before the meeting so that everybody's looking at the same thing when we're having the discussion. You got to make sure you identify the objectives and intended outcome of the call. If we're reviewing the report, the purpose of the call is to review and approve the report. And so everyone should know that we want to approve the report at the end of the call. If you're using an operator, you want to make sure to call in advance and confirm key information as well. Participating in a conference call. When you're participating in a conference call, some things you want to do is you want to make sure you take a roll call. So you need to know exactly who is on the conference call for record purposes. You want to lead the call. If you're leading the call, if you're in charge of it, you want to lead the call by presenting an agenda and conference guidelines. So you're still going to let persons know what we're talking about in this conference, and you're going to handle leading a conference call just like leading a meeting. You're in charge, you control the flow, you have an agenda, you know what needs to be discussed, and you go through your agenda and you discuss everything that needs to be discussed. You're going to have participants identify themselves when speaking. So you always want to make sure, because you can't see who's on the other line, you want to make sure that you know who is talking at all times so that you can write it down if you have to, or address what you need to. You want to make sure you speak clearly, spelling out all unusual or difficult names and terms. You want to avoid interrupting other speakers. So whilst others are speaking, you don't want to interrupt their conversation at all. You want to just listen attentively until it's time to speak. You're going to take notes of important points and comments, and then you want to apply good listening skills and encourage discussion and participation from everyone on the call. So you don't just want to be the only one talking. You want back and forth, you want feedback, you want actual discussion. On the screen is an example of a fax machine cover. And so we don't frequently use fax machines anymore. We do a lot of scanning, but some companies do use fax machines. And so normally what happens is a fax machine is similar to a copy or a printer. You put in information in the top of it and down slides the paper, it scans the paper, and it transmits the image of the paper onto another fax machine at a number that you dialed. So a fax machine incorporates using telephones and scanning features. And so, like it says here, you can send images or documents using telephone connections with a fax. And so whenever you're sending the fax machine, you have to know the person's number and dial that number and press send in order for the document to pass through, scan, and go over the line to the next fax machine. You can only send from one fax machine to the next as well. And so when you're sending a fax machine, you should use a cover sheet, which is this. This is an example of a cover sheet. And it gives information such as the name of the person it's going to, the person it's coming from. RE is referring to what it's in reference to. What is the fax in reference to? If it's a report, say a finance report. CC is if you're sending it to somebody as well, another copy to somebody, carbon copy. If you normally put the fax number here, you put the date that the fax is being sent and the number of pages. And then of course, there's normally comments you can add, and there's normally a section that you can tick if you have any additional request from the person you're sending the fax to. And so normally the company would have a basic format or basic format of a fax cover sheet that you can use. And so they normally would have the company name, the company information at the top, because you want to make sure the person knows who it's coming from. And then you want to have that information on there, who it's going to, in the event that something happened and it goes to the wrong place. Well, at least we know who the information is supposed to go to, etc. And so these are, you normally would fill these out every time you're sending out a fax, just to make sure that everything is clear. You include the number of pages on there because you want to make sure when you send the fax, maybe if 3 pages come out instead of 4, the person knows to expect there should be 4 pages, not 3. I'm missing a page, and therefore I'm going to call the person who sent it to me and ask them to resend the fax because something went wrong. All the pages did not go through. And so that's the purpose of the fax machine cover sheet, just to let individuals know who sent it, who this is supposed to go to, and what they want to be done with it. Because you imagine sending a fax into a company with no name on it. How would they even know who it's for? How would it get to the right person? And so it's crucial that this information is included on fax cover sheets. When we talk about using the telephone, I wanted to point out that it's important to focus on telephone image. When you're on the phone, you want to make sure the listener feels welcome by your voice. And so even though they can't see you, smiling as you're talking makes a huge difference. And so you're encouraged to smile, be patient, be pleasant, and be precise. You want to pay attention to your tone, which is the changes in pitch you use to emphasize words. Changing your tone affects how a person may perceive your message on the phone. And so you want to make sure you have a good tone at all times. Your pace, you should not speak too quickly. You want to try and speak in a way that the person understands what you're saying, not too fast, not too slow. Your volume should be sufficient so that the person is able to hear you without sounding as if you're screaming at them. Enunciation involves how clearly you speak and how distinctly you speak. So not mashing words together because you're not sure what you're saying, or mumbling. If you're mumbling, you're not enunciating. Enunciating means that you can clearly understand what's being said. Of course, proper grammar, avoid slang and colloquialisms, by what you're saying, all that stuff. You want to have proper grammar on the phone because you represent the company and you want to represent the company well. And then, of course, vocabulary. There's no need to use long, complicated words. Use simple words. That gets the message across because you have no idea who you're talking to. They might be well educated, they may not. And so therefore you want to make sure that you are in neutral ground. So nothing too fancy or nothing, no words that are too big to confuse whomever's on the phone. When answering calls, it's encouraged that you answer promptly. You give the name of the business and your name. So, hi, you reached Old Bay Seasoning Company. This is Brenda speaking. How may I help you? Let them know ahead of time who they're calling and who they're speaking to. Do your best to assist the caller. Before hanging up, you want to make sure to conclude the call. You want to obtain the telephone of the caller. So you obtain their number. Just in case you have to call back or just in case the line disconnects, you can call them back. You want to keep checking on calls that are waiting. Anybody you put on hold, you want to make sure that you don't have them on hold for a very long period of time. That would be pretty rude. And then you don't want to be over familiar. So you don't treat telephone callers like strangers, but you also don't want to be too friendly, overly friendly, and say something that's inappropriate that offends them as well. When taking calls, you always want to have a message pad handy in case you have to take a message quickly. And then if the call is disconnected, you want to try and call back as quickly as possible once you have that number. So that's why it's important as well. And of course, you want to smile with your voice. With telephone procedures, some things that are going to happen, you want to be screening calls, transferring calls, handling a disconnected call, and giving information. When you're screening calls, that means you're trying to determine who is calling and the purpose for the call. Why are they calling? Who are they trying to reach? When you're placing a call on hold, what you're doing is what you need to do is ask the caller first if they would like to be put on hold. Because could you imagine if they don't have the time, or if they're on a cell phone and they can't accept the charges for a long period of time, you don't want to just say hold and then put the person on hold. Find out, is it okay to be put on hold, or do you want me to take a message and we call you back or something like that? That might be easier than putting them on hold. Transferring calls, that's when somebody calls a number and you're sending the call to another phone. You can do that in a business office. When you're sending a call to someone, you want to find out from the caller or let them know that you're transferring the call to somebody else who can assist them. And what you also want to do is try and find out, hey, is that individual okay with me transferring the call? Are they free? Are they even there? You want to call the individual you're transferring the call to as well. Call them and find out if they can take the call. Then you can go back and let the person know that I'm going to transfer you to so-and-so, or I'm going to take a message if they can't take that call. If a call is disconnected, that means that midway through the conversation, the call, I guess the caller hung up the phone or the phone hung up itself. And what you want to do is you want to immediately call back and apologize for the disconnection and continue on assisting the customer as best as possible. You want to give, and when it comes to giving information on the telephone, you want to make sure you don't give more information than you need to. Give enough. Let's say if they're asking if somebody is available, or you don't go into much detail. You don't say, oh, that person is out to lunch, or that person is here, or that person is there, because you don't know who's on the phone or why they're asking. And so you want to be as discreet as possible and say they're unavailable. Can I take a message? Not they went out to lunch an hour ago, or, you try to be, especially the more up you go, in a company, the higher up you go in a company, and you're working for higher up individuals, the less you give out information on the phone about them as well. Taking messages, a big part of answering a telephone in a work environment is taking a message. And so normally there's a message pad that's given. They're very helpful. They have key things that you can ask and fill out and take information on behalf of the person that's leaving the message. And so what you're going to find is you want to make sure you take down the information accurately and complete. In the for area is normally where you're putting, well, who is the call for? If it's for Mr. Jones, then the call was for Mr. Jones at this date, at this particular time. All right. The time is pretty important. The day is important, because if Mr. Jones is off the island on a trip and he comes back to meet his messages, he'll know which one to call first. Normally you call the more urgent ones first, or you call the persons that were that first telephone, you call them first. So you don't have them waiting longer than others. And so that's important here as well. Whenever you see M, normally this is the start of Mr. or Mrs. So you identify M and you would add the R if it's just a Mr. and that person's name, or if it's a Mrs., MRS, and put that person's name as well. So if it's Mrs. Bain, then you're going to put RS Bain as the person who called for Mr. Jones. Okay. When you see that's normally referring to of what company. So because this is a business to business thinking, we're thinking that the person is calling from a particular company for another business owner or a business person. And so is going to be the name of the company. If it's a power company, then you want to name the power company. The phone number to get her back at, the cell number or fax if possible to reach Miss Bain at is what you would put here. And if she gives a message, you could write your message in here. So if she says she's going to pick up the report tomorrow, then you would make that note here. Miss Bain said she would pick up the report tomorrow. In this section here, sometimes it's a small section, sometimes it's a big section, but all you need to know is you would just tick what is relevant. So if Miss Bain asks Mr. Jones to please call, then you would tick please call. And when Miss Bain sees it, she would know that that the person wants them to call, or that it's urgent or something like that. Okay. Signed We're going to sign off on the message pad as the person that completed the message pad. And so normally you put your name or initials at the bottom of the pod as well. Key to messages and telephone numbers and things like that are telephone directories. And so in telephone directories, these are just books that have telephone information in them. They're not as common anymore, but in some businesses, they do have specific telephone directories for key customers and for persons in the business establishment. And so a telephone directory is any book or any place where you can go to search a phone number of an individual or a company. And so with telephone directories, we have local ones, local being Bahamian ones. So Bahamians, we do have phone books that still come out. BTC creates phone books. And as a part of these phone books, they normally have an introductory page or section which talks about the Bahamas. They normally have emergency phone numbers like key government agencies, hospital information is normally in that section. Blue pages, white pages, and then yellow pages. The blue pages tend to talk about governmental numbers. The white pages tend to alphabetically list names of persons and businesses in order. So if you're looking for Samuel Francis, you could look up F for Francis and find Samuel Francis, and you should be able to find his phone number, PO box information in the white pages. And then the yellow pages is what's used to identify companies by category. And so let's say I don't know exactly who I'm looking for. Maybe I'm looking for a plumber or a school. Well, it's going to be a category for plumbers or a category for schools. And I would just find that category in the yellow pages, and they would list all of the plumbers who signed up to be a part of the directory. And so you'll be able to find a plumber based on the yellow pages. But both of these are pretty helpful. It just depends on what you're trying to find. There are also personal and company directories. And this just happens when a company puts together their own booklet to list everybody's number in the company. So different phones will have different numbers. Different phones also have different extensions, and it's hard to remember all of that. And so a company can have a booklet or a paper together that lists everybody's name or title and their number to make it easy to find a number when you're trying to call somebody in the office. There are electronic directories as well, so not everything is local and paper. Some directories are online, so like Yellow Pages online for the US. For the Bahamas, Bahamas Local is an online directory as well. And then when it comes to directories, you can get directory assistance trying to find, let's say you don't have a phone book or access to a directory. You can use directory assistance to help you find somebody in a particular area or specific number. That used to happen in the day. And they used to have local people just sitting down in the operator room, assisting with helping you get a number that you need to get. When we talk about telephone services, we can't forget long distance services. And so these are services that are offered by telephone companies that allow you to be able to call long distance or outside of your country. And so there are a number of different ways to call an outside number. One is going to be direct dialing, where we just pick up the phone, dial 1, the area code and the number. And so in that instance, we require no operator assistance at all. That's one way. Another way is going to be operator assisted calls, which can happen either from person to person calls or collect calls. Normally are the different types of operator assisted calls. And so operator assisted just means that you use an operator to help you connect the call. And so person to person call normally refers to the company, normally refers to an individual who's calling. They call the operator, they dial 9, and then they put in the number, and an operator picks up. And normally what happens is you would say to the operator, I'd like to have a person-to-person call, and I would like to call this particular individual at this particular number. The operator dials a number, And what happens is the operator finds out whether or not that person is available. And the minute you talk to that person, that's when the charge starts. And so they charge you for every minute from the point that you reach the person that you were trying to actually call. So it doesn't matter who picked up the phone at first. If you ask to speak to John Doe, when John Doe gets to the phone, then the call begins charging. That's a person, the person call. You're the person who's the caller. You don't get charged until you connect to the person that you want to speak to. Collect calls, on the other hand, are calls where the operator assists you by dialing the number. And then when the call gets put through, normally what happens is the operator would ask, this is a collect call. And they would say, would you like to accept the charges to the person that received the call? With collect calls, the receiver of the call is charged for the call. And so therefore, if the person says, yes, I accept the collect charges, they pay the bill once the conversation begins or once the call is transferred. If not, then they don't continue with the call, because the person has to agree to collect calls to be charged before the operator can continue. Outside of that, there are things like calling card. And what happens is there are small cards that you can buy that have a certain amount of minutes on it or a certain amount of time on it. And you can use the number, there's a number or, there's some type of confirmation on it that you can dial and use with a regular phone. And you're not charged on your phone, you're charged when you purchase the card itself. So if it's a $10 card, however long it takes you to call that number at whatever rate, it's going to go up to $10. It's going to charge up to $10 worth. And so if you use all of it, then the card is going to expire and it's going to cut off after it reaches the $10 mark. Or if you don't use all of it, then some of it is just going to sit there until you use it on a card like a balance to be used. And so all of these are ways to call long distance services. Normally rates differ. And so the rates for each of these, or the price per minute for each of these types of calls, is going to vary based on how long the call is. So the longer the call is, the more you pay. The time of day, in some instances, maybe a collect call or a calling card, or maybe a specific service provider may allow you to make late night calls for a cheaper price per minute. The type of service, each of these services have different rates. And so depending on the service that you select, you have a specific rate to pay. And then of course, the time zone, depending on how far you call, normally the rate differs, okay? And so call charges, if you ever have to calculate the charge for a call, is going to be based on the service you selected, the rate per minute based on that service you selected, and how long the call was actually for. And so this is just another example of, or a better description of, the special long-term long distance calls. Your person to person, 0 area code, then a telephone number. Then you tell them you want a person to person call, and the charge begins when the person is on the line. Collect call, dial 0 area code and a number. You say collect to the operator, and of course they ask if the person wants to accept the charges. You have prepaid phone calls or carding calls, calling cards, same thing. And then we have toll-free numbers, which a lot of companies have toll-free numbers for their customers, which allows the customer to call the number and get directly through to the office without being charged for the call. The company normally would take on that call. Just bringing it to your attention, telecommunication companies in the Bahamas. Your main ones are Cable Bahamas, BTC, and now Alive. And there's actually a Bahamas WiMAX in Nassau that actually provides some telecommunication service as well that can be used. Now let's take a look at telephone equipment, what's being used in office space. Telephone equipment, key equipment used in office space are things like speakerphone, being able to talk on the phone without holding it up. Mobile phones are very common as well. You have touch-o-matic phones, which offer a huge amount of buttons that just allow you to touch and call a specific number, or touch a particular button and it dials a particular number as well too. Very convenient. We have automated answering machines, or voicemail, that can be used on a lot of work phones. Personal paging, which allows you to pick up a phone like this, press a number, and call on an intercom a particular individual. So maybe I want to call and say, have somebody call my extension. I can press the button on the intercom and say, and it'll go ding normally. And what happens is then you say, okay, can Susan please come to my office immediately? Susan, please come to my office, using an intercom. We have touch tone phones, which are these phones here where you just press in a button and they have different tones for the letter, the number that you're using. We have cell phones, same as mobile phones, switchboard phones, which are huge phones with a huge amount of buttons. They're managing all of the different phone numbers that the company has, all of the different lines and extensions. And so it's a huge phone that's just used to transfer calls back and forth to different people. And then, of course, we have a cordless phone. Main telephone features of business phones are things like auto redial, which allows you to redial the last number you called. Call block, which restricts callers from making long distance calls. We have call forwarding, which sends calls automatically to another number. Caller ID displays a number of the caller on the phone. Call queuing, it reestablishes a connection after a busy signal when both parties are free. So if you're trying to call somebody and their phone is busy, you can put in call queuing and the phone is in the background, just going to keep trying to dial it until the phone is free, and then it's going to dial the number and ring to your phone as well, so both of you can pick up. Call return allows users to press a code and dial the number of the last call received. We have conference calls with 2 or more persons on a call. Call waiting, putting persons on hold. We have memory is a good feature as well, able to memorize and keep track of important or common phone numbers. Speakerphone, of course, camera phone, email access, because some telephones allow you to send emails from them. Some telephones give you access to email websites. Text messaging happens on most phones, and then application programs or apps which allow users to perform various tasks. All these are features of the telephone. When it comes to telephone costs and telephone usage, companies are concerned with controlling costs. And so some things that they may do is they may encourage their staff to make a more expensive calls only when they have to. So if you don't have to make a long distance call, don't do it. Plan your calls to make sure the time spent is efficient. If you're unorganized on a call, that means you're going to take a longer time on the call, meaning that the cost of the call is going to be more. Also, you want to call when rates are less expensive, or find a plan where there are cheaper rates for call. That saves money as well. If there's a wrong number dialed, you want to notify the operator immediately after the call to make sure you receive credit for the phone call itself and not billed for a wrong number. You want to compare rate plans and then learn how to use equipment and features on the telephone system to avoid wasting money as well, making sure your employees are aware of these things. All right, so that is telephone, a good idea of how telephone works and what features are available for business telephones, as well as how you should take notes, how you should be when you're on a telephone call. All these things are important to understanding telephone in the office space. I hope these things help and it was good information. Feel free to contact me later at email address, Instagram, or of course the comment section of the site. Enjoy and happy studying. Hi, Brenda here. I just want to take the time to say thank you for choosing this course. Thank you for choosing yourself and for preparing as you should for office procedures, BGCSE. Look forward to more from me and Business Teacher Powell, and I look forward to seeing you in other classes. Bye.